Sometimes I believe that there's a lot of things that we should keep private, right? But I think there's some things and some events and some stories that will make a bigger impact if we share it, because I believe that some things are much bigger than ourselves. So this is kind of what sparks this video, and nobody really knows this story except for the people who were there at that particular time. Throughout my speaking career, I have always made it a priority to go and speak in places that most people don't go. I believe that hope needs to be shown, and hope needs to be seen. On this particular day, I'm not going to say where. We're going to keep it a little bit private, right? But I went to go speak at this youth detention facility center. And as I got inside the center, right? And as I got there, the officer met us at the door, he shook his hand, and he said, Akeem, I just need you to put all of your things inside these cubby holes right here. We'll lock it up and we can get going. I said, okay, cool, man, but I brought the medal. Like, I want to show the kids the medal. And he says, man, you brought the medal? Man, that's great. But I just don't want anything to happen to the medal. I think you should just put it in the cubby hole, right? And I said, nah, man, like I can always look at the medal. I didn't bring the medal for me. I brought the medal so the kids can, feel it, right? And so we go and he gives us a tour of the facilities. He shows us some of the art stuff that they're doing, some of the courses that they're going through, just kind of the rehabilitation process and teaching and educational side. So when they leave this system and go out back into the real world, that they'll have some kind of foundation and something to work into and grow with, right? And so we get there and we're sitting down, and all of a sudden, some of the workers come over and I'm meeting them and we're introducing and we're just kind of touching base, and I'm asking questions like, man, like, what are some of the things these kids are dealing with? What are some of the things that you've seen within them over the time that you've been able to work with them? Right? And they're sharing. We talk a bunch about, mistakes and stuff like that, right? Just general conversation. I'm trying to get an understanding of the feel of how I can deliver a message that will speak to them and not just there to motivate them, right? So another officer comes over to me and he pulls me aside and he says, Akeem, man, why are you here? I said, man, I'm here to speak. He says, man, like, no, I want to ask you again, like, why are you here? Because nobody comes here for these guys. Like, nobody comes here for these guys. I said, don't you think that's the problem, right? And so I go and I sit down, and then all of a sudden the kids come in, right? The guys sitting on one side, girls sitting on one side. The guys are wearing all green, whereas the girls are wearing all blue. All got the same shoes on, right? And I'm looking at these youth and I'm just thinking, man, there's a lot of potential here, right? There's a lot of good things inside of them. I don't know what it was inside me that made me think that. I didn't know any of them. But sometimes you can feel something even if you can't explain it, right? And I was sitting on my seat and this young lady came and sat beside me and she said, I heard you're speaking today. I said, yes, I am. She says, I heard you're an Olympian. I said, yes, I am. She says, no, you're not. I said, you don't think so? She says, nah. I said, why not? I said, because I haven't seen you on TV, right? I said, okay, cool. You make a good point. And then they introduce me and then they hear the bronze medal part and she says, oh, wow, okay, I guess I was wrong here, right? But here is the core of the story. As a speaker, right, I've learned that you cannot deliver the same message in every single room. Some of the things may be similar, but you got to read the room to be able to deliver a message that speaks to them and give information to them and not just motivate them, right? There are so much more things that is more important than motivation when you're talking to a group that you need to reach. So as I was presenting, I'll never forget, I took a moment, I took a step back and I was just looking at him, right? And immediately the message that I had in my mind before completely changed, right? They didn't need to hear necessarily about hard work. They didn't need to necessarily hear certain things. They needed to know that there is someone there that believes in them, that understands that sometimes when you're put in a position of survival, unless you have guidance, it's not going to be conducive to your success. A lot of these kids who was in this position, they had made a mistake. And because they made a mistake and nobody looked at the circumstance that they had to overcome or they were bred into, that they just put them in a position and immediately wrote them off. So I said some things in there that no one has really heard me say before. I shared some things that a lot of people, unless you were there, never heard me share before. And the only way that I was able to share those messages because I understood where they were coming from. I'll never forget, after I delivered the message, I had two encounters that really stuck with me after the presentation. One was that young lady that I was sitting beside, and she says, "Wow, you're from Jamaica." I said, "Yes, ma'am." She says, "I'm from Jamaica too." I said, "No way." I said, "What part?" And she tells me where she's from. And I said, I asked her a question. I said, "How did you get here?" And she stopped and she looked at the floor. And then she said, "When I was born, my mom left me at the hospital." I said, "Like she left you like inside?" She said, "No, she left me beside a garbage can by the hospital. And a family who was visiting Jamaica, they saw me and they took me and they actually adopted me and they brought me to Canada." And I said, "Wow." I said, "Man, I know what that's like, right? Because I was homeless at one point in my life." But I said, "Have you ever actually thought about the love that your parents saw in you to bring you to Canada?" Yes, they may not be your blood parents, but they saw something in a child and they ran with that and they took that and they nurtured that and they cared for that. So I want to ask you with the question, more of a challenge. How are you going to repay them for the love that they showed you? Know that what you're going through right now is a season, and yes, you have a choice as well too, but I know that this wasn't your fault of how you got to where you are. You were just trying to survive. You were trying to find love. But know that you had the love. So what you do next beyond when you get out of here, just know that you don't have to be defined by your circumstance. As a matter of fact, you can go back and make sure and say to yourself that I will never be in this position again, because you are loved, right? They didn't just leave you there. If they left you there, they wouldn't have a heart, but they saw something in you and operated in the spirit of love. So when you get out of here, you do everything in your power to reciprocate that love back and show it by bettering yourself. And she looked at me and she said, "I'm going to do my best." I said, "That's all I ask. That's all we can never do is our best." That was one conversation. The other conversation I had with this young man, he was probably about 6'2", right? He was kind of probably about 200, this big dude, right? 16, 17-year-old. He says, "Man, was everything you said true?" I said, "Man, I didn't come here to tell you something that I haven't lived." And he said, "Man, you really overcame all that stuff?" I said, "Man, I didn't come here to tell you something that I haven't lived." And he says, "Man, that's crazy, man." I said, "Man, I'm going to tell you one thing, right, that I never really heard a lot growing up, right? And that one thing is you can do what it is that you set your mind to. But I want to be completely honest with you. You already at a disadvantage because once you get out, like you have a record. And because you have a record, like people going to look at you differently. You're going to be labeled a little bit differently. You may have the same skill set. You may have the same education as the next person, but you got a record. So you already at a disadvantage. What does that mean? I'm saying you don't really have more opportunities to get it wrong. You know what I'm saying? You got to be intentional about what you do. And this, whatever it was that you did to get you in this position here, look, I understand you were operating in a space of survival. When you're trying to survive, nothing really good comes from it without guidance, right? So whatever it is that you choose to do, because you can do it, man, you can do it. But you have to make up in your mind that whatever it is that you're trying to do, you are not going to do the opposite. That's going to hamper you from reaching that goal and making that a reality, right? It's going to be tough. It's going to be hard. I'm not telling you that hard work is always going to pay off in the areas that you think it should, but I'm telling you, if you work on your character, if you become a person of your word, if you become who you say you are, if you show up when you're going to show up, if you put your character first, man, everything else will come on display. Your character right now is a little tarnished because of the position you got yourself into. But man, every single day you got to choose character, right? You don't just inherit that stuff, right? It doesn't just because your dad or your mom or whoever was a good person doesn't mean that you get that. You have to make a decision right now that you are going to do better. You know better, so you got to do better. And he shook my hand and he walked out. Most people out here talking about perfection, right? I'll be the first to tell you that I'm not perfect. No one is perfect. We all make mistakes. And everything that you do Are you trying to be a person who is flawless, who can never do anything wrong? Or are you going to be honest with yourself and say, you know what? Because I made these mistakes, I'm going to share it with you. And because I made these mistakes, you will grow from it. So when I went in there and to deliver a message, I was going out there with my heart on my sleeve. And there's certain things in life that we can't inherit. You can inherit genetics. You can inherit certain things. But every single day, man, your character, you have to choose that. You can't inherit that, right? Everything that you are, everything that you say you are, you have to be that behind closed doors. Otherwise, people gonna know. So I'm gonna pose you with a challenge and more or less a personal question. Are you who you say you are when nobody's looking behind closed doors? Like the real, authentic you? Like the vulnerable you? Like the naked you? Or are you just someone who is trying to get ahead, trying to get over on people by being something that you're not? You don't move the world forward by being something that you're not. You transform the world and allow people to know that it's okay to be yourself, that you don't got to be like anybody else, that God put a purpose inside of you, that no matter how many mistakes that you make, as long as you choose the next day to want to get better and you choose to get better every single day, that your life can be impacted. But most importantly, those coming behind you can see that I'm not perfect. I am flawed. I make mistakes, but I can and I will and I must do better moving forward.